I'd say good evening or good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending upon where you are. I'm here, Jeremy Walsh, owner and creative director of Soulbound Studios, with some of my staff members. I've got Jason Deathwelter and Vi Alexander.
Vi
Alexander now on my right. We're here today to talk to you about our latest Q&A. So the topic of today's Q&A is pre-alpha experiences. Something that we originally touched on for the first time almost a year ago now is in June of 2016 when we first mentioned that we'd be doing a couple different pre-alpha experiences. And while we've talked about it kind of at length in different formats in our community on IRC and Discord, we've yet to have an official Q&A about it. So today we're taking questions through the channel that we set up on Reddit. So we're taking questions through our Reddit channel, as well as potentially live things as they come up as follow-ups. But yeah, we just want to give you guys an opportunity to make sure you've got your questions answered and to talk about things in depth.
I feel like there might be a bit more questions coming from the live chat today.
There might be.
Because Caspian literally just dropped the latest design journal 5 minutes before we walked in the room.
Yeah.
And guess what it's about?
It's about the pre-alpha experiences. So
wow, really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
So I've been busy lately. We've got GDC. I'll be going to GDC with Vi next week. We'll be there in San Francisco. I'll be on stage with the folks over at Improbable for a discussion there, and we'll also be inside of the Improbable booth, Vi and I, showing off Chronicles of Elyria and talking about our relationship with Improbable and our use of Spatial OS. And then the week after, we'll be in Boston for PAX.
PAX East.
Yeah. So it's been a crazy couple weeks. I had been meaning to get that design journal done sooner than this. Unfortunately, it gets done when it gets done. And in this case, it literally gets done T-minus 1 minute from the start of the Q&A about the said topic.
Yeah.
So there will probably be discussions from the Twitch channel about that document. So go ahead, if you haven't already and you're interested, check out our homepage, chroniclesofelyria.com. The first news item that's posted there is DJ number 19. That's design journal number 19 on pre-alpha experiences. Go ahead and read it over. You've got nothing else better to do right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you could listen to the soothing sounds of our voices as we talk about much of the same stuff that's in that post and answer the questions that we've got on Reddit, which are largely about asking the same things that you've talked about in the post.
Yeah. That's unfortunate, but hopefully then you guys will be able to read in advance and ask follow-up questions as we go along. Again, inconvenient, but I figured it'd be better to do it now than wait until after the Q&A, because then it would just be recapping all the things that we talked about without really any opportunity for you guys to follow up on the information that we just dropped. So this seems like the better of the two alternatives.
Indeed.
So, all right. Shall we get started?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Tori, what do we got?
Well, first question from Sefith Darkness. What is the current timeline regarding pre-launch? Seen an old one posted around, but it'd be nice to know what's up to date.
So we had posted a couple months back a timeline kind of showing our general development plan and the order in which we want to do things in. And that is still moving along as planned. There's an arrow I think somebody posted in there. It's Delethrus. Delethrus keeps posting it, which is convenient. That hasn't changed. So we are continuing right now towards the development of our pre-alpha experiences, which is relevant to the topic. Prologue, Kingdoms of Elyria, and Elyria MUD are all kind of simultaneously in development right now. Prologue is the thing that's under most proactive development by the larger part of our team because a subset of the Prologue is what's going to be shown at PAX. And so being that that's our kind of visual experience, that's a lot more fun than gray boxes moving around in the back end of a network. So
right, this is why you see in the updates a lot of screenshots of that region around New Haven, between Silver Run and the forest that surrounds that region in Titan Steppe.
Yep. So that's happening. Elyria MUD is undergoing a lot of back-end stuff right now. There's a lot of development of early data structures and planning. And then, of course, Kingdoms of Elyria is more than just the game itself. It's also about the dance of dynasties, and a big part of that is settlement selection. But before we can get settlement selection, settlement and domain selection to people, we need to have the geography of the world. And so there's development undergoing right now on our world generation and making sure we have the initial continents laid out so that there will be land from which to, or settlements from which to select from. So all that's happening right now. The next goal, next objective, next major milestone you'll see is settlement selection. We don't have a firm date for that yet, but our estimate hasn't changed. We're still thinking that it's probably going to be sometime late spring or something like that. And then in terms of the pre-alpha experiences, it depends on how our resources shift between them, which one's going to drop first and when exactly they'll land. So we don't know yet, but as soon as we know and have a confident date for you guys, we will let you know. But we are excited about them, and we think you guys are going to enjoy them. Cool. Next question.
All right. This is from Caleb Daniel. Will we be able to build our families before Expo to the point that our friends will be able to be in our families at the start of Expo?
Jason, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so essentially we want
Can you
to...
guys repeat the questions?
Oh,
Oh, okay. Will we be...
No,
Us.
you guys repeat
Yeah,
the questions.
Sure.
yeah,
let's
so
repeat.
will you be able to build your families before Expo to the point where your friends can join you in your family? And we want to give you sort of the ability to be in the family, be able to play with your friends, so providing those opportunities for you. So it might not necessarily be planning out your family ahead of time. You can make those social interactions before exposition starts. But we're going to give you the opportunities to get in the families you want with your friends by like either unlocking in parent and children codes. And then also we're going to be making the families a little bit larger so you can have those slots available. So you might see like two parents having like 3 or 4 kids instead of just having a single kid. That way you actually have those opportunities to get into the same family.
Yeah, one of the important things to note here is that we are still trying to create a kind of consistent, like internally consistent world. And so when players come in during exposition, they're following the same kind of system that people will use after exposition, which is to say, during character selection or character creation, they pick a family in which to join. And so how big your family is and your ability to bring friends in is constrained by the size of the family that you join. So if you join a family that's got many people, has a very large noble house, then they'll be able to have a larger family. If you pick a family with only one child, then your ability to bring in siblings and friends in that relationship is much harder. But as Jason said, to make sure that there's enough larger families for people to join during exposition, because we are talking about some of the oldest, wealthiest, and in many cases the more established houses, is to make them a little bit larger than what would normally be available post-launch. That way it increases the likelihood of getting 4 and 5 and other friends together in a single family.
It's also worth noting that in the pre-alpha experiences, you are playing your ancestors, not exactly your characters.
Mhm.
That won't start until exposition or at launch or whenever you join when that part happens. So if you're not in exactly the same family during those experiences that you are later on when the game is live, then it's just a different experience. It's not necessarily like you're completely shut out from being able to be part of your friend's family.
Before we continue too much further, I also wanted to take a chance to point out that we have some mugs. We got a chance to show
And a
these
banner.
off. And a banner. We got to show these off in the exclusive Q&A last week, but we haven't gotten a chance, or most people haven't seen this publicly yet. We got some new stuff from the Kingdom of Nearath. So we got a new mug, and we also got a banner behind us. We greatly appreciate these things. It gives us an opportunity to not only have us share the world with you guys that we're creating, but you guys are then sharing the world that you're creating back with us. And that feels awesome. It's good to see that you guys are engaged in that way. So if you are in an organization like Fennec Academy or in a kingdom or something like that, and you guys want to send things like swag, like mugs or banners and things like that, please do know that while we are not showing favoritism towards anybody in particular, we are more than happy to show off those things inside of our room here. And we are hoping to, over time, as you can see next to Vi over here, obtain a collection of mugs and other things so that people can see the Order of the Melon and Helgrim Enterprises. And we'll leave the other one off camera for the moment.
Yeah, keep them decent. I think Wrecking Ball is all I can tolerate.
All right. So that's all for that, guys. Let's get back to the questions.
All right. Will we be able to work on trade infrastructure in KOE? For example, river barge trade, upgrading roads, or starting the process of making the trails that eventually turn into roads?
So the question is about infrastructure development during Kingdoms of Elyria.
Yeah, we want to have those opportunities for you to actually start building your kingdom. It's more like Kingdoms of Elyria is about learning like one of the roles that you can play in the game. So managing a kingdom, and so being able to upgrade the infrastructure. So maybe you're building like a dirt road and then you upgrade it to a stone road, or go on from there. So we want to give those opportunities for you to figure out how you want to manage your kingdom. And it's not purely for like everybody who's like, or it's everybody could sort of take part in it too. So even if you're not managing something, this could give you something to aspire for as well. So you could think about, like, it was actually kind of fun to get into a position where I'm controlling something, and I want to learn how to be more of a domain manager instead of just an adventurer, right? So it gives you those opportunities to see where you can grow into.
Great. Next.
Will I be able to gain NPC followers in Kingdoms of Elyria and MUD, and what significance will they play?
So the question on this one was: will you be able to gain NPC followers during Elyria MUD, and what significance will they hold? I will let you answer this one as well.
This one's, I guess, a bit easier. So for those, we're sort of focusing on specific aspects. So the gaining NPC followers is probably not going to be something you would see in Kingdoms of Elyria or Elyria MUD. It's more about sort of like interactions with other players, the Dance of Dynasties. And so the most I think we could maybe see is like a pet or something like that. But, getting a relationship between you and an NPC is something that we probably don't want to sort of put a lot of our development efforts on at that time.
Yeah, it's important to talk through about the kind of the different milestones again and underscore that we've got our pre-alpha experiences, but it's still pre-alpha, and so there are some features and mechanics which are not going to be available in the game yet, especially during the first introduction to these pre-alpha experiences. Take a look at the design journal we posted a few minutes ago. You're going to see that there's a couple of iterations in there. Over time, as time goes on, we will continue to release new functionality into Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD. So not everything will be there on day one of those games. That even being said, they're still designed to be pre-alpha experiences, and at some point the conversion of those, or the integration of Elyria MUD, Kingdoms of Elyria, and the Prologue becomes our Alpha 1 kind of pre-alpha milestone. And at that point, while we will continue to have Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD running so that people can continue to play the Dance of Dynasties and stuff like that, at that point those are largely sustainable on their own, and we'll be turning our attention towards the kind of final version of our Alpha milestone and then our Alpha 2 and things like that. So at the point where we start working on Alpha, we're talking about systems that aren't really pre-alpha type systems, or things that require a little bit more polish, a higher level of quality. And then when we talk about Alpha 2, we're getting into more of the advanced kingdom and land management stuff, which may not be available initially either. So it's just important to note that things like NPC followers and stuff like that just might not be available, partially because it's not an area that we want to focus on when we're testing things, and partially just because they may not qualify for something that's a pre-alpha feature.
Yeah, I mean, the point of the pre-alpha experiences is to try to get the game into player hands as soon as possible so that we have the opportunity to learn and improve, iterate the game, fix things, test things out before the game is ready for launch. And so it's pre-alpha experiences. They are not done. The game's not done when these things start. So they're going to be initially a smaller subset of features, and we'll add more and more as we continue on, and then eventually it will all come together in the game.
We have a follow-up question on Twitch from Dario Z. If Prologue the Awakening is set 5 years before Exposition, how will it reflect the influence of events happening in Kingdoms of Elyria that will come out after Prologue, but it's set way before Prologue?
So it's not actually, I think, exactly 5 years.
Repeat the question.
Repeat the question, that's right. The question roughly was, if the Prologue takes place after Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD, how is it going to incorporate the events that occur in those longer pre-alpha experiences? And the short answer is that it won't. There is going to be a region in the world known as Titan Steppe. There is these settlements of New Haven and Silver Run. Somebody might have the opportunity to pick those during settlement and domain selection, or we might leave it as a neutral territory that can't be governed. But the idea is that the Prologue is actually focused on just that single county, and so the majority of the world events that are occurring as part of the Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD pre-alpha experiences won't impact Prologue. And the timeline on that is actually, I don't think it's quite 5 years. I think it's a little bit longer than that, but I don't have my timeline with me. So.
I kind of put 20-ish years in one of the last updates. So we're narrowing down on exactly what time.
In terms of order of operation, there is Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD, and then we did let people know that there was the Prologue after that. So you do know that Prologue occurs after those things. Then there is a little bit of a gap, and then there is the start of the a little bit of gap. Then there is Exposition, and then there is the launch of the game.
Yes. Perfect. Next.
Excellent. Next question. By the way, I can tap without messing with the mic.
Oh.
And we don't have Sozo here to enjoy that, but that's
Wait,
okay.
what if I tap on the mic?
I mean, if you type in the mic, it will.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I
anything
mean, I
there?
wore a tie and a vest because he's not here today, so.
So you gotta be the
Someone
best
has
friend.
to.
So I have to start like messing
No, you
with
have to-
everything on the table.
He's gonna hate us. Next question.
This is back on Reddit from Solaris. Will resources be shown listed during land selection? And if so, what kind of resources would we be able to see? An example, ores like iron, silver, or lead.
So the question was, will resources be visible during land selection, such as iron and ore, various types of metals and things like that? I think it's important to note that there is a mixing of terminology that I want to clarify really quickly. We have domain and settlement selection, which happens within the next few months. And that domain settlement selection is the opportunity for the aristocracy and the nobility to come in and pick their settlements, as well as to pick their counties, duchies, and kingdoms. But there's no actual land selection as a part of that. It's a very high level, just sort of like, this is which settlement I want, this is the domain that I want to govern. Land selection actually doesn't happen until the beginning of exposition. Basically, once you get into exposition, you get to pick which of the parcels of land that you want. This is also when the gentry will pick their land. And so, if you're talking about like truly land selection, then during exposition, you'll know what resources are available because you'll be able to see them. So if you see an ore mine, an ore like node, or if there's trees or other things on the plot of land, the parcel, then you'll know that it's there. You know, if it's got a water supply and things like that. If you're talking about for settlement and domain selection, we do plan to provide as part of the user interface high-level information about, you know, what type of resources are rich in that particular region. It probably won't give you like the exact amount of that resources because that's part of the process of exploration and discovery. But, you know, there will be general knowledge of this region is known for being high in sugarcane or high in metals of various types, or, you know, whatever we decide the resources are. And it's important to note that between now and settlement and domain selection, you know, we are working a lot on the biome still and even what resources are available. So at domain settlement selection, it may be that we actually don't have the full set of resources listed because we're still iterating on it. So it could be that we introduce new resources later on that you didn't know about and you won't discover until you actually get in an exposition and start looking around your lands.
I imagine that this question is being asked because somebody might want to choose one piece of land or one region over another because they really want to be like the
Silversmith?
silversmith of Elyria, and so if their region has none of that, it's going to be very difficult for them to
Right.
fulfill their role-playing goal of being the silversmith of Elyria.
That would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
So yes, you'll be able to get that information.
All right. Harry, you're gonna have to tag me if you want me to ask questions. Let's see.
Tag
Next
Tori
question.
if you need her to ask questions.
Yeah.
If you're on Twitch, tag Chronicles of Elyria with the @ symbol in front of it, and yeah.
So Tori says if you'd like to message her and get her attention on Twitch, make sure you do @ Chronicles of Elyria so that she knows that you're asking a question of us. Otherwise, I'm sure there's a lot of things going on.
Right, there's
Twitch
probably
channel.
a lot of chatter, and it's difficult to sift through all of that. Help us out.
Yeah. Next question.
This is on Reddit from Sabicat.
Ooh.
Will there be tutorials for those players who have never played a MUD, so the learning curve would not be so severe?
So that's a great question.
That's a great question.
The question is, will there be any kind of tutorials or tutorialization for people who have never played MUDs before so that they have a better understanding of how to play Elyria MUD? Heads up, if you haven't read the design journal yet, which I assume most people watching this have not yet, back in December we actually made a change to the scope of Elyria MUD. As it says in the design journal, I headed out to London to visit our friends over at Improbable and had a long discussion with the CEO there on several things that we were working on, and one of which was an in-depth conversation about our pre-alpha experiences. And he rightly pointed out that a text-based MUD, while it's very easy for us to develop, isn't necessarily as accessible to the broader audience of today's gamers.
I don't see why not.
Who
I
doesn't
play-
enjoy watching scrolling text and having to remember where everything is located in their head or on graph paper? So
It's an acquired taste.
yeah,
So many hours lost.
so many hours.
Slightly.
So what we did is actually we conceded to the point, and also it was actually a good decision because by changing the scope of Elyria MUD to be simply a text-based MUD with the concept of rooms like you'd normally have in a MUDs, but instead tracking your 2D positional coordinates and having a top-down 2D graphical MUD, it allows us to do more with positional queries like making sure that bonuses that apply when you're within a certain proximity of things are applied to you, or things like bolstering when you're near your family, making sure that your attributes are scaling correctly when you're within close proximity of your family members. All those things that require a 2D coordinate, now we get to test as well. So henceforth, Elyria MUD is actually a graphical MUD. It's a 2D top-down graphical MUD in the spirit of like
Think old NES adventure games,
Zelda.
Zelda.
Zelda and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the short of it is there will be some user interface to check your equipment and inventory and things like that. Not anything significant. Those are all disposable user interfaces because it's really designed to test the back-end mechanics, not the user interface. The user experience and user interface of the game will be different, but it will include simple user interfaces, and then there will be a character on screen, and you'll be able to see the NPCs that you're interacting with, and you'll be able to see the edges of bushes and buildings potentially and things like that. Nothing too extreme because again the focus is going to be on the mechanics. So it might be that when you encounter an NPC in the world that they all look exactly the same except for maybe a little bubble over their head that tells you like the name of the NPC or like what type of NPC. Like this is a baker, this is a butcher. Well, they look exactly the same, but it's clear that at least one of
One
them is
has
different.
the chef hat.
That's right.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know. That's
That's a lot. That's resource intensive. We'd have to make a
Oh.
chef's
Make
hat
that
versus-
asset, which is
I can draw it in MS Paint.
You might have to. I think our content creators are pretty busy as it is.
right,
little
we,
bit.
we want them to be actually making the real 3D assets for character customization and everything. Not,
Fair warning, you might get programmer art with these.
Okay.
Alright.
Question from the Twitch chat from Alluvial. Will the lower level alliances that have already been made be kept come KOE? Barons to counts and counts to dukes. Many have already started building their groups, but are uncertain if those alliances will be able to hold.
So the question is, roughly speaking, there has been a lot of work thus far spent on building alliances, counts pledging themselves to dukes, dukes pledging themselves to kings, and even individual mayors and barons pledging themselves to counts. Are those going to carry over into Kingdoms of Elyria? I think the best way to answer that is that that's really up to the players. Technically speaking, until settlement domain selection happens, those relationships aren't actually formalized. That being said, once settlement and domain selection occurs, people will have an opportunity to come in under the domain of the person that they've pledged their allegiance to. Whether or not that happens due to influence order selection or because of a mechanic that we've been working on with the higher level backers, allowing them to actually reserve a few slots, not specific locations, but reserve a few slots that guarantees that half of the people that would be able to come into the position are pre-reserved. So, for example, there are 24 count spots within every duchy. And so 12 of those spots can actually be reserved by the Duke as a pre-arrangement so that then whoever those counts are that have pledged their allegiance to them will actually get an opportunity to be within their duchy.
Follow up on that.
Let me finish. So those are respected if the players respect them. We are encouraging that. We do like that the players are doing that, and we want to do what we can to make sure that those relationships maintain beyond what people are doing now into settlement domain selection in Kingdoms of Elyria. Yes, follow-up question.
Okay, this is from Mystic Haze on Twitch. Many seem to believe that it is a disadvantage to not be building our communities before domain selection. I am curious if the team feels the same. Or will
The
someone-
question is there's an observation that people feel like that there is a disadvantage to the people who are not spending time and energy right now doing community building. And do we agree?
That's kind of a complicated.
It is a complicated question.
question.
Do you want to give a stab? Do you want to?
Well, I can give a little bit of the history. Certainly, the Dance of Dynasties, as it was imagined, perhaps naively by the team, was
You guys are proactive.
was meant to begin at domain settlement selection, and so nobody would have done any recruiting or alliance building or anything like that prior to that in our minds. And that did not happen. It started already, and so really one of the things that we're trying to do is find the best way to respect and preserve what has already been built in the community as best we can, but at the same time, we can't necessarily plan for there are no rules, every scenario, everything is allowed, type of Wild West that's sort of been going on. So is it a disadvantage to have not been recruiting already? Well, we hadn't planned that people had, but it's not necessarily a bad thing if you do, provided that what you've done is able to fit into the eventual mechanics and rule set that will be the reality of Kingdoms of Elyria and that sort of thing.
Make sure your fantasy matches our reality.
Right. We're thrilled to see people doing the dance and to see so many people already swearing fealty and making alliances and stabbing each other in the back and all the good and bad that comes from this sort of intrigue. Not maybe all of it is going to be able to translate 100% once things are real.
Yeah. I think another good way just to look at it is that from our perspective, when settlement and domain selection occurs, that's the point at which these relationships are officially formalized, and as soon as Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD begin, that's when the game begins. For us, Chronicles of Elyria is different from any other MMO you've ever been in, where at launch day or potentially in like a 3-day head start, that's when the game begins. For us, because we're giving players the opportunity to write the history of the world, to develop the recent history of their ancestors, and to define conflicts that are occurring between the different kingdoms and duchies and things like that, really the game kind of begins the moment that we open Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria to the paid backers. And so at that point, whether or not you've formalized any relationships with anybody before that, your counts will be your counts and your dukes will be your dukes, and whatever goes forward from that point on is kind of writing the history of the world. So if you formalize those relationships unofficially, formalize them unofficially, if you've been making those kinds of relationships ahead of time, it might go more smoothly for you. So you could potentially be at a slight disadvantage that way, but our goal is not to provide advantages to people who are doing this ahead of time. We would really like it to be as a level of playing field as possible, but we also understand that, just like people using social, like VoIP clients, have an advantage over people who are just using chat. There's really nothing we can do about that. Relationship building is going to provide a small advantage to people.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty much like most multiplayer games. If you go out there and you make your alliance and you form your guild before the game starts and you go out there, you're going to have the benefit of having your community with you, whether it's an alliance with another kingdom or whatever. It's just people are being very proactive right now trying to do those things. So,
Well, as an addendum to that, it's not a bad idea to be active in the community and to be well respected.
Mm-hmm.
Even if when comes time you're not able to get all of your counts in your duchy. If you have a whole bunch of other people who are going to be in the game who think you're a swell person, and that's going to provide... What?
I said you're swell. Go ahead.
That's going to provide more opportunities for in-game intrigue. So maybe one of your counts wasn't able to be a part of your duchy, but joins a different duchy instead, but you guys still are buddy-buddy, so you decide to do some back-channel agreements between your duchy and this other duchy, and that could be cool in the long run, too.
But are you encouraging political espionage?
Absolutely.
Just clarifying.
Absolutely. So... Be active. There will be an advantage, I guess, from just having a good reputation as a quality member of the community,
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what sort of official alliances are able to be brought over.
Next question.
Okay, it's going to be a series of questions because they keep popping up.
Oh, I'm out.
Okay. Series of questions.
Okay. We've got a series of questions coming up.
We have a
do
series
this.
of answers.
All right, let's see.
I'm serious about this.
Wasn't it already
Wow,
a series?
Caspian.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Seriously.
First, will we have to spend any EP during the pre-alpha experiences or alpha experiences? I'm sorry. And will we be having to purchase additional sparks of life if we die?
Good questions. So there are two questions right here that are related. One of which is will we be having to spend our EP during the pre-alpha experiences, and the other one was will we be having to spend or buy additional Sparks of Life? I'm going to take them in reverse order. The first of which is Sparks of Life, absolutely not. The things that are occurring inside of Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD are things that happen to your ancestors, not you, and they do not directly affect the titles, benefits, and other things that people received as part of their pledge packages. So, the lifetimes that you live in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD just generally don't have any cost against you guys. It's an opportunity for you to get involved and play the game as a way to help us test and make sure that the systems are secure and strong, and also to write that early history. So don't worry about having to buy additional Sparks of Life. It doesn't cost you anything.
Right. There are some games out there that have showed up with basically paid betas that exist in the community. And
Right.
No, we're not making you pay to be...
This feels like a good opportunity to plug the Improbable Google deal.
Go ahead.
So one of the things I want to point out, just along with those lines, like as I was saying, one of the reasons you often see that is because running games, even in an alpha and beta experience, is expensive. And so, you need somebody to be covering the costs of the testing that you're doing. One of the things we did when we partnered with Improbable to help build Chronicles of Elyria, because they're providing spatial as our backend, is to bring with us a partner who's not just providing a technology, but is also working hard to kind of change the industry right along with us. And one of the things they recently announced is a partnership with Google, so that people who are building games on Spatial OS in partnership with Improbable actually get their cloud hosting during the alpha beta development cycles effectively for free. And so what that means then is that for the duration of our alpha and beta, we don't have to pay the hosting fees that come along with that sort of development. And so that means that we have the opportunity to do alpha and beta testing and things like Chronicles of Elyria's Elyria MUD and Prologue, and Kingdoms of Elyria without having to worry about paying for it.
So does that mean that the beta is going to run for the 10-year story?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? I think as long as we're not officially generating revenue, once you call it launch day, and there's a lot of companies that want us to hit launch day, so it won't last forever. But yeah. So in terms of Sparks of Life and things like that, no, because we don't need additional revenue for you guys for that to cover those costs. That being said, EP is an interesting one. This is something that we're talking about internally in the company right now, and I will just go ahead and let you guys know that we haven't decided yet. Because the work that you guys are doing in Kingdoms of Elyria does help build infrastructure and things like roads and things like that towards the kind of development of your domains. And so whether or not those things require EP or anything like that is something that we're still debating on.
Right. EP stands for exposition points.
Right.
And the intention was that they would be used and consumed only during exposition, but there may be other reasons why we might fudge that.
Yeah.
We might change it.
Because ultimately exposition's about building the history of the world and helping to build up the settlements and things like that exist at launch. It's just that we might be doing that over a longer period of time. So instead of just doing that sort of thing during exposition, it might be doing it as part of Kingdoms of Elyria as well. So we don't know yet, is the honest answer. I can see it going both ways. As you can see, there may be differences in opinion. So we don't know yet, but it's one of those things where if we do decide to do that, it won't be without considerable thought, conversation with the community. We'll definitely be talking to our exclusive backers and then having more dialogue with you guys, because we don't want you guys to feel cheated or like we're trying to take advantage of a situation. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that the points that you guys are getting during exposition are also still going towards kind of the development of your guys' domains in all scenarios, which could include potentially Kingdoms of Elyria. That being said, there is a corollary to that, which is if you read the design journal, you'll find out that we are also looking at awarding things like influence points and EP as part of participating in those things. Participating in a game like Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD not only provides us value in terms of testing, but we know that you're going to want to bring other people along with you and kind of help establish a larger community and a rich story. And so it does influence the success of the game. And we're pretty committed to making sure that when you guys do things that help us, that you're recognized for that. And I think we all agree that participating in Kingdoms of Elyria, the Dance of Dynasties, and Elyria MUD is helping to influence our success. Cool.
All right. Is there more in this series of questions?
It's so dry in here. My lips are always like, I gotta start wearing chapstick in here. I almost said lipstick.
Do you want some?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
You just have some in your pocket or something?
No, I'd have to
Okay.
go get it.
Let's not do that.
Let's see.
If I had it in my pocket, would you put it on?
If you had it in your pocket, I would probably put it on.
I have some.
Oh,
What?
missed opportunity.
So, missed opportunity. All right, so what is the next question?
I'm going to move on to Reddit.
Okay.
Yeah. Next question is also from Sabacat. Will the MUD and KOE be accessible via mobile devices, or at least have some component of notifications available through that technology?
So the question was, will Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD be accessible through mobile devices, or at least have some kind of notifications
About what's going
about
on.
what's going on? At this point, we are not planning for them to be mobile accessible. The new format of Elyria MUD, making it kind of a 2D graphical MUD, as well as Kingdoms of Elyria, kind of requiring a larger user interface, makes it more conducive for desktop applications. That being said, we are probably going to build the user interfaces for those in Unity, not web-based at this point, and Unity does support mobile development, so it's something that we can consider, and I certainly appreciate the idea of being able to get at least mobile alerts and things like that for the things that are going on in the game. So it's something that we'll definitely be looking into. She would have to say yes or no, because that's totally within her realm of making sure that we stay on schedule.
Yeah,
So-
we'll cost it out and see what makes sense. Next question.
Question from Grubbish in Twitch. Will OPCs be a thing in the alpha?
In the alpha?
Yeah.
I don't know yet. They're definitely an Alpha 2 thing. I don't know yet whether or not they're an Alpha 1 thing or not. With Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD, it might be that for the duration of those things that your character doesn't have the AI running for a little while, or that they just vanish from the world for safety sakes, because we probably won't have the OPC system to the level of support that we need it to at the very beginning to allow us to rationalize saying that they're going to be there. So I'll just say we will get those in as soon as we can.
Yeah, it would probably be phased in later, but maybe not right on the initial start of that phase.
Right. Keeping in mind that this is your ancestors, and it doesn't tie, while it does generally tie into the backstory, it ties into the backstory of the world in the same way, people you've only ever distantly heard of impacted your lives. So, we're less concerned about people vanishing from the world during some of these backstory type events, at least initially. We do want to make sure that that doesn't happen towards the end, but there's less reason to make sure that it's, always there. Plus, people aren't losing money off of that, which is very important to us.
Yeah, I mean, the initial, it's probably just going to start out with a weekend that the servers are up and people can get in, and then, we'll start adding more persistence to the server as we manage to be able to make sure everything's up and running well, and we're doing updates and stuff. So, I mean, it's going to be a staged experience anyway, so things will...
I agree.
Great.
Sorry.
I see what you did there.
Oh.
It's Pun Central here, guys.
Alright. Question on Reddit from Sherry Lane. Is it important that we ensure we have decided on the right name for our house, settlement, kingdom, or county, duchy, kingdom before entering land selection and or Kingdoms of Elyria? Or are they not set in stone until we enter exposition?
So let me emphasize again. The question was, roughly, is it important that we have locked in the names of our noble houses, our kingdoms, counties, duchies, and things like that when we get into, it was stated land selection and Kingdoms of Elyria. And what I want to emphasize again is the difference between land selection, which happens in exposition, and domain settlement selection, which is what's coming up next. And the answer to that question is, it goes back to what we were saying a minute ago, which is, from our perspective, the game effectively begins with domain and settlement selection. So our belief on that is yes, it is important that before you jump into kingdom and settlement, like domain and settlement selection and Kingdoms of Elyria, that you have those names. And the reason for that is that if you play, or if you attempt to play those things without having the name of your noble house, then you're not really able to work towards your family's history and legacy and things like that. It doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to play, but you wouldn't be able to, because really at some point Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD will be open to everybody, even those people who aren't bloodlines. So there will be people playing who don't have custom surnames, but they still have the ability to jump in and play and just create a character in the world. But that being said, if you choose to do that and not use your noble your noble house, your custom surname, and things like that, then you're not building the reputation and legacy for those families. So I would say it's very important, especially if you're nobility or aristocracy and are talking about settlement names, kingdom names, duchy names, that you have those locked in before Kingdoms of Elyria begins.
Right. It will be very difficult to create a legacy for your ancestors if
There are no ancestors.
there are no ancestors.
Yes.
So yes.
So settlement selection, domain selection, you'll want to know the names of those things. Primarily because if you create that domain, if you're saying I'm going to create the county of X, whatever that may be, then any mayors or barons who are looking for you are going to want to find you under the county that you've said your name will be. So.
Quick question from before. What would happen to your family line if you die in Kingdoms of Elyria?
What happens to your family if in your line, your lineage, if you die in KOE?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Your family doesn't die in Kingdoms of Elyria. Your character might, but we can kind of just keep respawning characters as necessary, and that just becomes the most prolific family in history. Rumor has it they had 12 billion kids. Not really that many.
I don't think we'll have that many.
Not many.
No.
Okay. But the point is that we are kind of writing the history as you play, and so if you have to create more characters in order to continue to play because you're getting killed in Elyria MUD or whatever, then according to history, they had a big family.
Okay.
Next question.
Question from Pickfire in Twitch. Thoughts on what constitutes as an exploit and how you will approach these scenarios as they arise?
It's not really related to the topic.
It's not really related
No.
to the topic, but I'm happy to answer very quickly. The question is what is our definition of an exploit and how will we handle such things? I think when we talk about the pre-alpha experiences and the fact that we're going to have the first part of our online system, that is a valid question in the sense that people will be playing with one another, and inevitably some exploits will arise at some point.
Certainly.
So the answer is we view an exploit as the ability to do something that we clearly did not intend for people to be able to do. Whether or not that's because of a bug, an oversight, or whatever else that may exist. And when people do things that we do not intend for them to be able to do and find an inherent advantage in the game against other people, we do feel like that's cheating and that's taking advantage of the game. So we would request that when exploits are discovered that people let us know so that we don't have to ban anyone. That being said, there is a difference between exploiting the mechanics of the game and doing things that we did not intend for you to be able to do, and just leveraging the mechanics as they exist in order to create emergent behavior. And I think we definitely encourage that. So things that are clearly within the rules system and the mechanics support, you're good to go. Things that you find which are bugs or true exploits to the mechanics, it's better not to do that.
Alright. Question from Icarens on Discord. Will architecture be a thing in the pre-alpha experiences to shape a building themed for a certain region that could affect styles when the main game releases?
The architecture tool.
No. So the question is will the pre-alpha experiences support effectively architecture and blueprints and the ability to control things like buildings and things like that? The answer is no. Building management or the ability to construct large structures and buildings is something that requires the architecture tool, and the architecture blueprint system is something that is an Alpha 2 feature and not an Alpha 1 feature. So while you will be able to, in Kingdoms of Elyria, for example, be able to say this is where I'm going to put a building for the purpose of my settlement development, it's not a situation where you can actually design the blueprint for that building. It'll be a stub, a template, and then upon actual gameplay you'll be able to do more once you get into exposition.
Next question is is on Reddit from Steward Cadis Carsa. What role will if any, will non-title holding citizens or even gentry have in Kingdoms of Elyria? Will they be able to assist their barons or counts, and if so, how?
This is an exciting question for me
I'm glad
because
that
we've been holding on to this one for a while.
Yeah.
So the question was, will non-title holding individuals be able to play a role in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD? And the answer is absolutely. That's one of the things that we addressed in the latest design journal, which is something I hinted to kind of elusively before, which is that the two games are intimately connected with one another, Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD. And while in KOE, the the aristocracy and nobility will be doing things like mobilizing armies and military and, changing the taxes and laws and things like that, it ultimately is Elyria MUD that those things are impacting. So, as I mentioned in our recent design journal, if you were to attempt to mobilize in Kingdoms of Elyria an army at a location, it pinpoints a flag and says, this is where I want our army to be. It has to be the actual players in Elyria MUD who then take that information and go there and do that thing. And so it's really the players who are the aristocracy and nobility directing the players who are not. And so through Elyria MUD, anybody who is a paid backer, even at the most basic level, the Elyria package, at some point when we open it up to everybody, will be able to get in and play. And your ability to go in and do those things will mean that whoever your liege lord is, whether or not it's a mayor account or whatever, it's only through your actions can they actually attain any kind of success. Because no matter what package or title you have, if you can't get people into those games to do what you ask, and you don't have a sufficiently large following, which includes NPCs, then you will not have very much success. Likewise, we mentioned that previously, as well as in the design journal, that it's an opportunity for people to earn influence points and store credit for doing really cool things inside of Elyria MUD, which could be story related and things like that. And it's possible to gain enough influence and store credit from those to actually upgrade your packages and things like that. So we encourage everybody to play those, regardless of what your current level of title is.
Yeah, the back ends are tied.
Yeah.
So they're running off the same information, and a lot. There's a lot, frankly.
It's a lot like an RTS game in the sense that one person, in this case the nobility, for example, is the person who's directing the units on the map, but all the units are actually the other players. So maybe they'll listen to you, maybe they won't. It's exciting times.
Okay. Let's see. Hi to the camera from Ms. Lar.
It's like they say hi to the camera and we instinctively just like wave back, like, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Question on Twitch from Dr. Heathcliff and Darius. Will the souls we receive at Exposition have any relation to what we did during Kingdoms of Elyria or in MUD? Example, I was an assassin and I'd receive deviant souls for character creation in Exposition.
So just like we don't require people to use Sparks of Life during the Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD, there's no connections between the souls of those two. While the family and legacy and history is persistent, the souls are not. So there's no way to do character development during that time.
Okay.
Primarily because we don't want to punish people who aren't engaging in those things. While there is motivation and benefit to participating in those things, and we do want to kind of help players get into a better position in terms of like technology and research in their families, dynasties, and things like that. We really don't want to view this as a head start for players. It's really about just setting up what the world is in terms of lore and history at launch, and not about doing min-maxing and things like that.
Right, there are a lot of games out there now.
Sorry.
There are plenty of games
min-maxer.
that are offering head starts, and so there is some confusion as to what like exposition really is. Exposition just a head start for the game, and no, it's not.
Helping us build the world.
Yeah, exposition is not character building, it's world building.
Okay. Question from Malkodu on Twitch with a follow-up from Dulafi's Actualin. Did I say that right? On Discord. Will talents be a thing during the pre-alpha experiences? And to what extent will the fantasy aspects of this low to mid-fantasy game be present in KOE, Elyria MUD, and possibly alpha?
So there's two questions.
Yeah.
One, are there going to be any talents during these alpha experiences? And two, I forgot what the second part was.
How mid to high fantasy, low to high fantasy.
How much fantasy is involved in these
Much
pieces?
fantasy we adding to this?
Go ahead. I'll defer to you on this one.
I think that how low to high fantasy will be depends upon how much mid to high fantasy stuff we want to test. It's more likely to be seen in Elyria MUD than Kingdoms of Elyria. I don't expect to see any high fantasy in Kingdoms of Elyria, or even mid fantasy. In terms of talents, keep in mind that Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria takes place before the kind of the events of the prologue. And so it is unlikely at this point in time that there would be many talents in the world, at least not that people are aware of. So while I won't completely say that it's not possible, That's not one of the systems that we're going to be planning on testing actively. That being said, we want it to be organic, and if it looks like we can introduce something that will have a significant impact either on testing or just on kind of the flow of the story, it's not something we can't do. We certainly could.
Let's see.
Wooden stool.
Oh, that's why I was going to sit there.
I know, that's fine.
You want to change
Nope,
chairs?
I'm good.
Okay.
This way I get to
I'll
pretend
change.
I
You
get
can
to
sit on
pretend
the squishy one.
No, because then I would be like 3 feet shorter than you.
Okay. Question from Angelica's on Reddit. Since I am not in a higher tier, I assume that the KOE is not for me. But why should I play the MUD?
I think we've covered that.
Yeah.
So you should play the MUD because it gives you an opportunity to help and grow and encourage the people who are playing Kingdoms of Elyria. It also gives you an opportunity to socialize and write back history and story for the character that you're creating. It gives you an opportunity to earn potentially exposition points or influence points. And as much as we don't want it to be a character development opportunity, we also want to find ways to encourage people to play. So that's not to say that we won't find other things in addition to that, but I think really it's an opportunity to socialize and get in the game and explore and see the world. Remember, these are server-based. The same things that are happening, I should underscore that because I don't think that that's well understood. There are multiple servers in this game. We have 2 North America servers, an EU server, and an Australia server that we're planning. And the events that occur in the Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD are designed to be historically accurate to the worlds that they're associated with. So there will be multiple instances of these games that are geographically specific. And so by participating in those games, you are getting your first opportunity to roam around in the world, learn the landscape a little bit, get a relative idea of where things are located, and start to build relationships with people who are also playing Chronicles of Elyria. So there are many reasons aside from just character development or having a title for why you might want to jump into Elyria MUD.
Yeah, the maps, the people that you share the server with, and the names of the families that are available, and the settlements, and those names are all going to be per server. And so it's going to diverge immediately that it's not going to be the same game per server.
Yeah, creating the lore is something that just seems really cool about that, being able to be part of a backstory. I think it was, what's the one game? Defiance?
The movie or the television show.
TV show and the game to where they would take content from the game, so it was like a MMO type thing, and they would actually take content from the game and implement it into the TV show. So you could be watching the TV show for the following season and be like, there's my character! Like, being able to actually contribute to a backstory of a game, there's like hardly anything out there where you can actually go around and be like, this is me, I sort of created this event. I was the one that caused the big downfall of X kingdom. Yeah,
and those are the types of things that I was saying, like, even though we don't necessarily bring character development across, achievements or story-related things that you've done might be things that we'd want to carry across just because we think it's cool to have that kind of go with you.
Cool.
Okay.
Next.
Follow-up question on that from Mandrake Drakus on Twitch. Can we play the MUD on 2 different servers if, for example, we have 2 accounts?
Can you play the MUD on different servers if you have different accounts?
Or characters on different servers?
Yeah, I don't know of any reason you couldn't. Yeah.
There you go.
Much
Yes.
like the game. I mean, if you have multiple characters, each with their own spark of life and soul, playing on multiple servers, then there's no reason you couldn't do the same here. It's actually beneficial in some ways because we get more coverage on the different servers that way. So,
if you're really into yourself, you could play your husband and wife and marry yourself. No?
Next question.
No?
Follow-up question on Twitch from
I'm not going to
Tsunami-
facepalm.
From Tsunami Jirai. Can you take your pledge packages to more than one server?
The question is, can you take your pledge packages to more than one server? The answer is no, unless you have more than one pledge package. Each pledge package represents a single account, and so while an account can have characters on more than one server, each pledge package is bound to a single character. So in order to have, for example, counties on multiple servers, you'd have to have multiple count packages.
Moving back to Reddit. Next question is from Sherry Lane. If you have a falling out with your kingdom during Kingdoms of Elyria, are you able to choose a different location for your title or settlement come Expo, or are you beholden to the decisions you made prior or during KOD?
Oh, this is an excellent question.
That's a good question.
The question is,
Good
if
job, Sherry Lane.
what happens in Kingdoms of Elyria, is that history? Is that final? Is if you have a falling out with your kingdom, does that persist? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's
that's
for.
the whole point of that. Yeah. So if you're playing Kingdoms of Elyria and you have a falling out with your king, and you just can't stand that person, the question specifically was, can you just abandon that location and create your county elsewhere or something like that? Nope.
You've already settled. You've made your name.
Yeah.
You've sworn your alliances, and if you mess that up, then that.
Not only that, but the beauty of that then is that when Chronicles of Elyria actually begins and you come into exposition, you've already got an opponent in the game who just happens to be your liege lord, and you now have the inspiration and motivation to team up with others in order to overthrow them. So we absolutely hope that there's things like that happening in Kingdoms of Elyria.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to leave my kingdom if I burn some bridges with my king. My plan is to become king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting like
He suggested it. I suggested. Well, actually, I did.
like intrigue and backstabbing and devious behavior?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Vi, you just perpetuated something that was happening in Twitch.
What?
Spy Vi.
Spy Vi.
Spy Vi.
I don't know what this is.
They're
It was a while
insinuating you're a
back.
spy.
Yeah, you're Spy Vi.
Oh,
Backstabbing
yeah.
intrigue.
Backstabbing and intrigue. Conflict is story.
From my old mud days, I will backstab you so hard your whole family will feel it. It makes so much sense in this game. I love it.
Yeah.
Spy Vi. I kind of like it. I think the time might be either explosive or a boomerang. Could go either way. If it was a bow tie, it'd be a boomerang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
We'll go with explosive then.
Okay,
Next
next
question.
question is from Nagash on Reddit. Will it be possible in the MUD for us to establish something like a national holiday, an example Easter, or major sporting event, an example the Super Bowl, and then have that be a thing that NPCs will recognize in-game?
Can people set up holidays, special days,
Events.
and events and stuff in these alpha experiences?
No. No.
No.
It's not. Yeah. So
Later.
at this point, establishing of holidays and things inside the pre-alpha experiences that the NPCs will recognize as holidays or other important dates is not something that exists. There's Illyrian holidays and Illyrian days of worship and things like that based on the religions and stuff, but there is no way currently, and I don't know if we are even planning to, have a way to take real-world events, move them into the game, and have them recognize them as important holidays or anything.
Real world, certainly
So
not.
Super
Yeah.
Bowl wasn't in scope?
No.
No.
He's saying those were examples, but like, could
Yeah.
you make the Harvest Festival
Yeah.
and have that be a thing that people care about in your settlement?
I've seen people RP it in games before, and they'll make their own holidays, which is always fun. It'd be kind of cool if we could actually get a system where the NPCs recognize it.
In the
But-
in the alpha experiences,
But not
there's
in
not,
alpha.
there's
Definitely
not
not in
going to
alpha.
be a way
No,
to do
no.
that.
And even then, even at launch, I mean, what you've effectively said is can you guys create a system which causes the NPCs to care?
Yeah. They don't care.
I mean,
they
when
don't
you,
care
when
about
you
you.
sound the alarm that you're being attacked.
True. I
we
mean,
want
there
the
are
NPCs
different
to care.
mechanics. We have those, and there has been topic of things like a Mayday poll, and like if you set up these things, and the NPCs recognize them as religious symbols, and recognize the date on the calendar as being a holiday, and then we'll agree to recognize them. But the introduction of new holidays, that's hard to do, because if I just set a statue up on a wall and be like, it's a holiday, NPCs worship this, that's not in scope currently. Please tell me that's not in scope yet
For launch or for alpha?
for launch.
Definitely not for alpha,
Okay.
and we could consider that request as something that would go into the live game.
Okay.
Okay, so speaking of building things, this is a question from Benjamin Nuies. Anyway.
Is his last name 3 Nuies? And is the inflection exactly like that?
Benjamin Nuies?
Yes.
Nuies?
Nuies?
Nuies.
Exactly. Okay. In exposition, will we be able to develop technology like my town, Kattegat, will be a town focusing on boat building? So will we get any head
I
start
feel like
in
that name's been used
exposition?
before.
It's a real.
Kattegat?
Yeah. It's also the setting for Vikings, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh.
And how rare will towns located around rivers and seas be?
Technology and research during
So,
Alpha.
technology and research is a component of Kingdoms of Elyria,
Mm-hmm.
specifically for kings and individuals. So a king can say, I want to research this type of thing, which then gets passed down to Elyria MUD so that the individuals can then go off and research that for the benefit of the kingdom. That will carry over into exposition as well. In terms of, I think the second part of the question was how prevalent river-based and other settlements will be. I mean, as prevalent as there are rivers and stuff in the world. Rivers are freshwater, and freshwater is required to live. So it's not going to be uncommon for settlements to be around freshwater rivers and things like that.
Okay. Next question is from Leva98989 on Reddit. Playing KOA, will I be able to influence what character genetics I'll have available at launch by marriage? Say I want fair skin and green eyes, so I marry only people with those features, etc.
Interesting questions related to some of the previous ones, but a different bent. So,
Yeah.
will you be able to have any sort of effect in your lineage genetically? So, will you be able to start breeding for blonde hair, blue eyes, or green and
They're wanting to
things?
know whether or not they can start creating
Eugenics.
the tribes that they want. I think more specifically what they're trying to do is say, I want to be able to play, I'm not going to name any of the tribes. It's going to be, that was rough.
That was
All right,
close.
that was close. If I were to try and create a specific, in a location, like let's say if I were to create a character in, for example, let's go with a broadleaf forest, and I wanted to create a character who looks like they were from a different region. We previously said that that's not something that you can do because we want our leaders to be symbolic of that region so that people can easily recognize them as the leaders of those regions. And the question they're asking then is in Kingdoms of Elyria, if they were to marry, for example, somebody outside of their region and then have children that they then play in-game, whether or not that would give them the ability to create characters that do not match the general tribe of that region
At launch.
at launch. I don't have a good answer for that.
I don't have a good answer either.
No.
I was going to look at you and wait for you to say
Look at
something.
this
Look at him.
lovely thing right here. Isn't this nice? Did that work?
That's a good
Did
one.
that-
Look, there's an eye here.
Yeah, there's stuff.
With the, like, and stuff.
Okay.
Eyes, my little eyes.
Yeah,
Spy
so the
bug.
short answer to that is that's a good question.
Yeah.
What our plan was for Kingdoms of Elyria was to be able to do the kind of like intriguing and potentially the marrying for the purpose of casus belli and declining of marriages and things like that. I don't think we were actually planning to allow you to define children and things like that, which seemed safe. But you raise a valid point that if you do marry somebody from a different region, you are in fact introducing a different bloodline into that region. And so that could potentially then drive the types of tribes that exist inside of your settlement. So my instincts are going to be, that's part of why we're doing this, is to allow people to write the history. And so if they write into the history that there was a marriage between two different tribes and that introduced a new bloodline in a region, that region would then have to be populated with people from that other tribe.
Right. We will have to consider this matter further. Thank you for your question.
Wow. Shut down.
So, this is a follow-up from Geraldo de Elyria on Twitch from a previous question. For people who are going to play as citizens, what will happen to your family if you start in a domain in KOE and choose another one at Exposition and Launch? It scrolled up really fast. Will that family still exist in the previous kingdom, or will they go with you in Expo?
They're all connected. So the question was, if you create a family in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD, and then choose not to use that family, whether or not you would be able to take them with you into a different region during Exposition. And I think there's potentially two options there. If you were to play Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD and create a family and play them in a specific region and they have their own settlement and things like that, or be a part of a settlement, whether or not you choose to play that family after Exposition or not, they're going to continue to exist. You've introduced that surname into the region, and the things that you did are part of the history. If you choose to, for example, not play that family or in that region at Exposition and Launch, that's a choice you're going to make, but that was your family. So, for example, you used your settlement titles, like or your bloodline. You used your bloodline ability to create a custom surname, and that was your custom surname in that region. You can't then create that same family with that same custom surname elsewhere, because that was that family. You've abandoned that family. That family is sad now that they have you no longer with them.
But when the game starts, you could make somebody from that family in that region and then decide
relocate.
to
Relocate,
move them. Like, not everybody in that family would necessarily come along with you. Like, they might not all transplant, but you could take you and maybe a spouse and some
children
kids
and
or
be like,
something,
hey, let's
and
go.
be like, we're gonna go over to this other region now, and make that part of the story that you tell in the game.
Yeah. Then
Or you
80%
could just
of you
be
dies from
exiled.
dysentery.
Or you just freeze to death. Or the kids just don't want to leave their current school, and so then you have...
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Anyways.
Are we there yet?
Next question is from Ferisa on Twitch. Are you going to release more information on land development, such as farming, breeding, mining, etc., prior to KOE and MUD? It would be helpful to know more about this prior to domain selection, so we can choose the best domains for our exploits.
So that was a longish question, but the question boils down to: are we going to provide more information on uses of land and crafting and things like
Professions.
farmings and professions
Yeah.
and stuff like that? As we mentioned earlier, we had our recent design journal we just put out. One of our goals, recent design journal, literally like hot off the press, recent as in moments ago.
Still uploading.
It's still. The idea is to resume development journals, or design journals. And so we do plan to, as we continue going forward now, not only provide more design journals, but I'm also going to, after PAX, being more proactive about making sure that our game guide section of the website is up to date and that information is crystallized in a single location. Because I feel like really we're getting to the point now where, as much as the community has done a great job of filtering the information and pointing people to the right location, we need to have that information in one location now. And the wiki is great, and we'll be pulling a lot of the information off the wiki back onto the game guide, but we'll also be adding some of our own stuff as the game guide, as the wiki has been community maintained and isn't 100% accurate. It's good for the most part, but there is some misinformation in there, and we want to make sure that there's a single source of location or a single source of information that's always guaranteed to be up to date and accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
I'm staring into your soul.
Hey, that's my job.
Sorry.
Question from Dragon Dave. Do we know how long we may play KOE until exposition?
We don't, because we can't announce when they're going to start yet. So,
20 minutes?
I mean, you play as many short sessions as you want to.
You could play at least 20 minutes.
At least
Yeah.
20 minutes.
At
At
least
least
20.
one.
At
At least 1 minute.
Yeah.
I would say 20 is fair. It's
Yeah.
more
That's very giving.
So the idea is that we want people to be able to spend as much time in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD as they can, so that we can get the testing and feedback we need early on, and so they have time to write the history. But we will cut those short as necessary in the interest of getting the game out in a timely fashion. So we won't prolong the release of the game solely to hit some kind of like minimum amount of time we want people to spend in Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria.
Is there an order of magnitude as far as time that you were thinking, at least between?
At least like 6 months.
I mean,
would think.
because once we do Kingdoms of Elyria, then we're going into Alpha 1 and Alpha 2
Right.
and Beta 1, Beta, and those things, like, are we going to stop Kingdoms of Elyria when, like, Alpha 2 starts?
No. So Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD will go from the moment they're created all the way to the beginning of exposition. So even though we move into Alpha 1 and actually have an Alpha 1 playable version of the game, and then we move into Alpha 2 and we bring in like the building and settlement stuff and kind of land management, those will be things that will be a different experience and will be available to our Alpha backers, and then we'll kind of expand out as well. But we plan to keep Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD up throughout the duration. And like I said, in terms of actual duration, we'd like people to be able to do that for about 6 months, or at least 6 months, but we will cut it short if we need to.
Alright, questions from Bryneth and Rasaya on Twitch. Is there any chance you'll be releasing info on the at least one tribe today? And will we be able to experience any of the tribes during the pre-alpha or alpha experiences?
Well, see, this was because you were like, thank God I didn't say anything about the tribes.
We have a
Sorry.
screenshot of it right behind you.
No.
No.
So, tribes.
Because tribes.
Because tribes. We've been working on the tribes. We've been working on naming them and just nailing down all of the little things that make up what a tribe is. What they look like, what they act like, where they live, which biome they're in, what sort of architecture they would have, what sort of tools they would use, what sort of social structures would they have, and how do they feel about the other tribes. And there's a ton of information there, and we're working on fleshing it out completely. The plan is that we will... Whoa, our main camera went away.
Just keep talking.
How...
Just keep talking.
Do I look at a different camera,
Just
guys?
keep
Quick, tell
talking.
me. Okay. so what we're going to do is start releasing on a regular cadence information about the tribes that has detailed information about everything that you'd want to know about that particular tribe, with visual things, including what they look like and what their architecture would be like, and depictions of their biome and things along those lines. What sort of things that they wear. We don't have one to talk about today, but by the next Q&A, certainly we should have at least one.
Yep.
And we'll also be putting up a whole dossier about the tribe on the game guide when it's ready as well, so you guys can see everything. Now, the second part of that question was...
One sec, can I recap real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Shortly, because we lost our video, and I don't know if we have it back yet. Do we know if
We
we
have it back.
All right,
Oh,
so
okay.
we lost our video real quick. So for people who were hearing it but didn't see it and are now like going, what the heck? We will be releasing information on the tribes in a regular cadence, as much as we can, on all 12 tribes. There are 12. We will provide a dossier with each one of them, which includes information about their sociology, psychology, resources, biome, name, concept art, and potentially models of what they look like, all kinds of information.
And mechanical game
And mechanical,
considerations
yeah.
stuff.
And there are lots of them. We did have our exclusive Q&A. We got a lot of valuable feedback from the backers, the high-level backers, and the people who are highly influential in the community. And the feedback was good, but we do need to take that in consideration before sharing any more information. But one of the things that we reiterated, or what we learned, we reinforced, was that without having some kind of concept arts and more visual information about the tribes, it's sometimes difficult to fully grasp what we're talking about when we describe the tribes. So we want to make sure you guys can see very, very explicitly what the tribesmen and women look like when we provide that information to you. Carry on. There was a second part of that question.
Yeah, there's a second part of that question about whether or not they would be, those tribes are
Oh.
really playable in the alpha experiences. I mean, you're not necessarily going to, like we said about the icons, all the NPCs and PCs might kind of look like the same model.
Yeah, I mean,
from a 2D top-down thing, so.
We're going to spend very few resources on the user interface for Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria, because that's not ultimately what we're trying to test. So every character might look the same, but we will have all of the tribes by then, and the data associated with them, and the effects and which biomes they can be in, and things like that. So it's
Right, like the mechanical considerations will be there as much as it makes sense for the type of gameplay that it is, and the names will be there, but probably not going to make custom art for each of them that is just throwaway 2D art that we're not going to use later on.
Could just put a color dot per tribe or something, but yeah.
Yeah, so
All the
yes
colors of the
and
rainbow.
no.
Okay.
It's really hard not to say any of the names now, because now they've been solidified, and so I keep wanting to communicate.
That one's been like cycling over in your head
It's
over
the
and
one
over.
that she
hasn't
said
it?
earlier too,
Yeah,
because
same. Yeah. No.
Now you're gonna have people scrubbing back.
Yeah.
well, she didn't say it earlier. She said it to me before we started. She's like,
Out
"Oh,
of the
do we
room,
want to
yeah.
talk about this tribe today?" And she named it, and now I keep hearing it in my head over and over again. So every time I think about using a tribe as an example, I keep going back to that one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hint, hint. Okay, next question is from Nutsidius on Reddit. And I'm going to kind of edit a little bit. To what extent can we customize and develop our guilds and academies prior to exposition? Will our customization be limited to broader categories, such as farming or crafting? Or can we be more specifics? Yeah.
Guilds and academies in the
How
alpha
much
experiences.
customization and development can we do of the organizations of Elyria before exposition? Well, I mean, if you look at the design journal, the recent design journal.
Oh yeah, the information.
Yeah, if you look at the recent design journal, one of the main focuses of Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD is on the organizations. That's one of those features that we will be kind of testing more thoroughly. So our goal is that you can do quite a lot with the development of these organizations even before we get into exposition.
Great. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I cheated. I put it all in a document and then came on camera.
Yeah, why didn't you guys just ask?
Yeah.
And
So now they have to take my word for it because I
Yeah.
can just be like, see, this is my trick. There's nothing in that post. It just has that name, and so I keep referencing that. And then afterward, and like people are just buying it. They're like, okay, he's gonna like if I go look and read this later, then it'll all be there.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing there.
You just
That's
like
my
trying
trick.
to troll the community.
That's what it is. Except for the like 4,600 words I had to write in order to put that design journal out.
Longest journal yet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is saying a lot because it was longer than Design Journal 18 on Kingdom and Land Management, which was also my longest to date. So
We just keep getting bigger and bigger.
I think the next one they predicted was 5,200 words.
Great.
Okay, let's see. Next question is from Malkodu on Twitch. What is this tribe?
Nope.
It's the tribe of Quest. If you Google it, there's some really good audio clips of it. Yeah.
We're not going to talk about the tribe today. It's not because we're trying to be jerks, but we don't want to say some stuff and then have it not be real in the end because of so many reasons. Like, one, we have to make sure that the names that we want to even call the tribes haven't been used by something. Sometimes a name sounds so perfect. I was like, oh, that really envelops the spirit of this tribe, and then we do a Google search and it's just like, oh, no wonder, because Tolkien came up with that one for something, or all these other fantasy novels.
This
So we
has
have-
happened already, by the way.
Yeah, so many times we're like, that's a great name.
The tribe
oh,
of Elvises.
oh, great.
Elvises? What is that? It feels right. I don't know.
It's like,
That
oh,
that
this-
didn't happen,
yeah,
but
there's- we came up with a lot of names that sounded perfect, but were ultimately
also
trademark
no
or
elves.
something. So we need to do our due diligence on making sure that none of these are already trademarked.
Are not?
That they are not already trademarked by other people, that they're not part of some other fiction or entity or IP, because that's bad.
Names and places in this document were not related to any real or otherwise.
Right. So we need to do our due diligence on the legal side there for legal and branding, and then also we don't have full information on everything in the dossier that we want to be able to put out, and so we're not going to share it for that reason, because it's not quite ready yet, and we also don't want to get sued.
True.
I'm not sure which of those is more accurate, but I think more the former. I think
It's
we
more
just
the
I think
former.
we mostly just don't want to provide information that ends up changing, because we don't want to impact people's it's a reality shift when you're like, my God, this is different than I thought it was going to be. And
Mhm.
so that being said, as soon as we can give you information on some of the tribes in particular, I think we will.
Absolutely, we're going to be as forthcoming as possible, like as we have been. We're not trying to be jerks.
Yeah.
I promise.
Keep checking the site for updates.
Okay.
Next question.
Next question is on Reddit from House Honeybrew. Will wards play a part in KOE or the MUD, or will their mechanics only come into play when orphanages for settlements and ward character creation are implemented?
They might not be available immediately upon launch of Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria,
Good
but
question.
what's that? Oh, sorry. Will wards? The concept of wards have a place in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD? There was more to the question, but ultimately it's what role will wards play? I think as a mechanic, that's part of character creation, so it's one of those things that we'll have to test fairly early to make sure that it's balanced and feels good. And so my assumption at this point is that there will be inside of the world generation some of the settlements in Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria that have orphanages, and will allow you to play as a ward during character creation at some of those locations. So I think it'll be there, if not at the very beginning, then shortly after that.
Cool.
Okay.
Next.
I just really want to say this person's name. The question was already asked, but
So say it.
Darian Hart the Satyr.
What?
It's DTARIANHJARTASEIDR.
Oh, it's D'Artagnan?
I don't know.
D'Artagnan the Satyr.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then we have douchebag McGee. Okay, let's see.
Right.
Next
I think you
question.
just set up that first. I think you set up the second name by saying the first one, just so that you'd have the opportunity.
Really? Yeah.
Now, this is a good maybe opportunity to mention that when you come up with your settlement names and your family surnames,
Right.
there is a review by the development team for approval.
Yes. Let's reiterate that, because I think that's important to note. This applies to anything that the players can name. So, family name, domain names,
Pets.
settlement name, pets. We really want this world to feel immersive, and we get that some people are going to claim that we're being too critical of names and that we're robbing you of your freedom to create names that you feel are connected to you. You're gonna have to deal with that. I don't have a better way to put that other than to say I think every one of the people on the team firmly believe that it rips you out of the immersion of the world to come upon a location or something like that that just doesn't feel like it makes sense because the person who named it was trying to be cute and funny and manipulate the name in such a way that it was obviously not period, or I say period, it doesn't make sense in the world that we've created. So one of the things that you can do to kind of help you is think about naming things with proper nouns, which eliminates the idea of an adjective. So if you're thinking about naming your settlement or your family name or something that is an adjective, it's probably going to be denied, just because that's just not often done. So think proper nouns, not adjectives. Probably not verbs either, actually, but
Appropriate names. No
Appropriate names.
goldfarmersusa.com.
yeah, no brands, things like that.
No brands.
So we are going
No
to be fairly
copyrights.
critical. We'll warn you guys in advance that we are going to be fairly critical because we feel like by us doing so, it adds to the overall quality of the world. So
Right. We don't want a cartographer to be putting out a map of the region of Buttland or something. Like, this is not going to happen.
Townie McTown face.
Townie McTownface.
she said,
Yeah.
"But."
What about my Gary Oogle Maps?
Right. No, Google Map. Gary Google Maps was
My
great.
Gary Oogle Maps. I'm cartographer. Yeah.
Right.
Farmville.
All right.
Let's see.
Next question.
Next question is from Nagash. Will there be any type of bestiary, list of all media, available before the release of the MUD? This would be so that characters have common sense rather than having to discover things like cows and sheep during the MUD.
Oh, it's too bad that Miguel's not here for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a plan to release a bestiary in general. I mean, maybe we can document some of the more mundane things, but most of the mundane animals are relatively well known, or it's fairly obvious that they're at little risk. Part of the fun of Elyria MUD, I think, is going to be to ascertain, because remember, this is history, so like they had to learn that creature was dangerous at some point in time. Why not in history?
Right. I get what he's saying, though. It's a little bit frustrating to, say, start up a role-playing game system and, your DM's like, hey, you come upon a Gorgon, and you're like, what is... I shake hands with it.
There's a
Gazebo.
The gazebo, indeed.
Yes.
I detect evil on it.
It's a gazebo.
So, maybe.
I don't know.
We'll see.
I think that there's important to have relatively good signposting in game so that people have an ability to determine based on what's happening contextually that something is dangerous versus not dangerous, but also nobody popping out of the side of the screen and telling you that you need to be wary of that creature because it's dangerous.
Yeah, I think common sense stuff is pretty good. Like cat, cow, like you should recognize that and know what it is. But like when you get unique and especially like signature creatures, you want to discover those for yourselves. Like it sucks to get killed, but it's also interesting at the same time when you're seeing something new and unique. And when it appears and like launches poison talons into you or something, you're like, whoa, that was kind of cool. I know not to do that.
This is why we let Sozo design the creatures.
Yeah, I like poison talons.
That's good.
I'm still trying to get him to create my idea. My idea is so good.
I remember your idea.
Don't tell him.
I'm not going to tell him.
So good.
Was it a gazebo?
No.
It's not a gazebo.
Eric in the gazebo?
Eric in the gazebo.
Yeah.
Next.
Let's see.
Tori, that's you.
This question keeps being asked.
No, not the tribes.
No.
Not the tribes, but will families, cities, counties, etc. be able to share names with other families, cities, counties, etc.? And if not, how will name choosing work? Since we're on the topic of names.
So, there is a difference between This question repeatedly gets asked, which
Yeah.
is, will name sharing be allowed between families, locations, and other things like that? So, and how will those things be handled? So, there is a difference between pre-launch and post-launch. Pre-launch, we have a little bit more control about the uniqueness and the overall kind of integrity of people's names and locations and places to the point where we want them to feel relatively distinct. So we will make it so that when players are using their custom surnames, which they've created, it's unique to their family. So only your family will have your custom surname. If it's one of the names that are available in the game by default, like Farmer or Smith or something like that, then those are not unique. So it's possible you could end up with the name of somebody else in the world, much like our own world. And so those are not unique. In terms of location names, we will, as best as we can, make sure that we maintain the uniqueness of the location names as well. But you have to remember that once the game begins, the names of locations is outside of our control to a degree, because the names of locations are still kind of generally regarded as what people recognize that region as being called. So if cartographers come through and they take the name of a valley and they set it to something that happens to be the name of a valley elsewhere in the world, but it becomes well known for that in that location, then that will be the name of that valley in that location also. And there's not much that we can do and not much that I think we want to do to interrupt that process.
Yeah, like much like our world, there's places that are named the same. There's multiple Springfields. Mexico? No, let's make it better. New Mexico. Same name for
New Haven.
New Haven. Newer Haven.
Newer Haven.
Newest Haven.
Come on. That was too easy. That was low-hanging fruit.
Let's see.
I was going to go with newiest, but it doesn't work.
Newest.
Nudist Haven?
No.
Nudist Haven. You have New Haven, Nudist Haven. They're adjacent to each other.
All right, you guys ready for this?
Totally.
There's the face palm.
Yeah.
It's on camera.
Yep, you got it.
4 cameras.
So,
4 eyes.
Oh, well, let's see. Gustavus wants clarification on the previous question. Counts being related to each other and to their monarch has not been clarified. It has been said that you have to be from the county that you are taking over.
Yes. So this goes back to the question that people had earlier during the discussion on Kingdoms of Elyria and connected families. So during exposition, people will come into the settlement that they have claimed, and they will basically pick the family that they want to be their own, and that's the visual appearance that they'll take of that family, and then they will give them whatever name that they chose as their custom surname, and that'll be their family at that point going on. That means that you're limited to choosing from the family that exists in that location. Whether or not they're connected in terms of biological relationships to other locations is something you will probably be able to discover. Jason and I were talking about this earlier, but when you go into exposition and go to create your character, something like being able to see who your other Dynasty members are, the other people who are indirectly related to you, like your cousins and things like that. So you could, in theory, come in as, you're the king, you pick a settlement, and you go ahead and set that up as the kingdom seat. Somebody else wants to be a relative of you, and so they, during the beginning of exposition, inside that same region, find another nearby settlement and observe that this person is a relative of the king and choose to make that their character. You are now connected in terms of your bloodline. And as we pointed out earlier, we're going to try and provide as many of those larger families and connections in order to make that possible. But what it isn't possible to do at this point is to pick a random settlement, pick a random person, and declare a biological relationship between them and other people in the region arbitrarily, because they're all the same bloodline. They have to share genetics, they have to make sure that all those traits exist. And so much like our world, you can't just pick somebody and go, we're biologically related now. So yeah, that doesn't exist. So we're going to do the best we can to make sure that people can pick as large a families as they can and have as many familiar relationships, but we can't guarantee that, for example, 3 different counts all inside of the same kingdom are all going to be biologically related to one another.
Okay. Next question is on Reddit from Sherry Lane, once again. Can you give a rundown on the various ways one can play the Dance of Dynasties? The sort of deals and alliances that one can make through marriage, child contracts, trade deals, etc., and how they could potentially impact houses and key players in both the immediate and distant future.
Okay, so the question was, can I give a rundown on all the things that people can do and all the ways in which you can impact the Dance of Dynasties? And they specifically cited things like marital and family relationships and, espionage, and they didn't cite that, but they're really just talking about all the things you can do to impact your position and relationship to title and nobility and things like that. I'm going to have to table that question. It's a really good one, but the topic of the Dance of Dynasties as it relates to progression through the noble houses is probably worthy of its entirely own design journal and probably a Q&A all on its own.
True.
It's actually on my list.
Yeah, mine too.
Of topics.
So,
check back later.
It's a good question. Next time.
Cherilyn is on a roll.
Later.
All 3 of her questions has been really gotten you this is a good question.
That's good.
Oh, nice.
So, if you do find that you're having a lot of those good questions, make sure you do put them on the forums. If you have access to early access, that's a good place for them too. If they're specifically related to early access type things, don't put them there just because. But if they are, then do that. But we like the hard questions. We might not always be able to answer the hard questions, but those are the ones that allow us to think the most. And for example, the question earlier about bloodlines and marriage inside of Kingdoms of Elyria, it's not often that people can ask a question that I don't have a really good answer for right away, and that was one of those rare times. So good for you.
Okay. Question from Ravenoris.
You guys got to do her a favor and come up with names that she can pronounce.
Well, I mean, it's spelled like Raven and then Oris, but I'm not sure if they meant it as ravenous or
Raven Oris?
Raven Oris.
Just ask Imshada to do a phonetic pronunciation guide for your name, and then we'll make Tori learn IPA.
Wow.
I gotta memorize all your names. Okay, let's
So
see.
the question was, though,
Is there any concern that having lasting consequences from these alpha experiences may discourage players from pushing the limits of the game mechanics, thus limiting the value of feedback?
that's a very good question. So the question was, are we concerned that the lasting effects, the things that people do during these pre-alpha experiences will discourage them from pushing the limits for testing and things like that? I think that's a great question. It's something that I was considering before. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that we're going to have this staged out in multiple places. So while we will have a publicly available version of Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD for everybody to play, we'll also have a version of it that's only available to the beta testers and the alpha testers and things like that. Because as we release new versions of it, we want to make sure that we're not putting out something that's entirely untested, primarily because of exploits and things that we have to do to roll back and stuff like that. So it will go out to the alpha testers and beta testers before it gets into the public. And also keep in mind that once we hit Alpha 1 and our Alpha 1 kind of experience comes along, which is our first kind of end-to-end, not quite feature complete, but end-to-end version of the online game, that's also going to come up with testable servers. And so people will have multiple locations to test. The things that happen inside of the Alpha 1, which should have all of these same mechanics at some point, that stuff doesn't preserve. So we hope that people use Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD as first an opportunity to test and provide feedback on things, not necessarily to look for breaking changes, but then people will continue to, after we have the Alpha 1 available, use that to kind of help drive the history and stuff like that while using the Alpha 1, Alpha 2, and beta test versions of the game to actually look for bugs and help us break things.
Right, because there will be character resets.
There will be character resets on the Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Beta 1, and stress test.
What's next? How are we doing on?
Some of these questions can be found in the DJ, so I'm kind of skipping through them.
But I mean, they haven't read the DJ yet.
Well,
We
this is
could
on the
have.
Reddit. This is all on the Reddit.
Okay.
I'm gonna go down there. Let's see.
It's 4:34. We should probably.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
We'll try our best.
Okay. Well, let's take a look and see if there was anything you feel like are really good questions, and we'll go ahead and try and get those done, and then we will cut the stream
Okay.
Because we can ramble on for
forever.
a long time.
Next question is from.
You're not allowed to encourage them.
I'm the community manager, man. I'm their voice to you.
She's bringing their voice
All right.
to
Okay.
us.
Next question is from Cerberus Ekru on Reddit. If I wanted to join a house as a vassal for a queen, say I was adopted in her family at a young age and grew to be a commander of her army, can I keep my birth name, race, and tribal features while still being titled with a role in her house or family? Or will I have the option to join her family with my distinct features of my chosen tribe?
I feel like this is not a hypothetical question at all.
I feel like it's not. It felt very specific.
Yeah.
I hope they know that adoption, though, is not a thing.
Yeah.
So there is no adoption in the game, specifically because there are mechanics for wards as well as mechanics for people who are in families, and we don't want people to min-max and get the benefits of both. And so if you sorry, what I do actually, just so you know, is I ask him what would be the coolest thing that you could do, and when he lights up and gets that really big like smile on his
He
face,
shuts
I
it
go,
down.
nope, let's not do that then. So. There are no adoptions, so if you chose to play as a ward, then you're a ward until you establish a family of your own. If you chose to join a family, then you're a member of that family. So while you could start as a ward and then join that person's house and become a servant or, quote-unquote, allegedly be adopted into that family as a servant or something like that, that's not going to change your surname anyways. You take on whatever surname you had before, and that's true whether or not you began as a ward or even if you began as part of another family. Just working in someone's household doesn't actually make you one of their bloodline.
Yeah, pretty much all of it's done through RP at that point. You'd just be like, find a queen who would take you in, live with her. There's your scenario.
I feel like there's a joke there.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there wasn't.
Could be.
Finding a queen and just living with her? Or... I don't know.
Let's see.
I guess
Cougar queen.
that'd be marrying up, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they didn't say married.
No, they didn't.
No, it's general in the military or something.
Right.
Commander in the military.
Commander.
You know where all those stories go.
I don't, actually. Anyways.
The queen and her bodyguard or commander of the military, they usually just like end up together somehow or something. Okay, anyway, question from It's Polite on Twitch. For expanding domains in Kingdoms of Elyria, where does this neutral land come from that we can expand into? And what happens if it isn't claimed during KOE?
So that's a question that ties to the design journal. Good for you. So we had said that one of the things that we really wanted to do, I'll address the design journal. One of the things we really wanted to do is put the power back into the hands of the player for how big their domains were going to be at launch. And so rather than having fewer number of domains where there was a strong likelihood that all of them were going to be purchased between now and exposition, or more importantly between now and domain settlement selection in Kingdoms of Elyria, we increased the number. We did that for a couple of reasons, but one of the main reasons is so that people can select those domains while still having a buffer around them. So, for example, there are 24 counties per duchy. If, for example, 10 or 15 of those counties were to be purchased and claimed before Kingdoms of Elyria, then the remaining ones are going to be neutral territory owned by NPCs around the current player counties, or So the idea with that then is that during Kingdoms of Elyria, through the development of Casus Belli, whether or not through espionage or marriage or through many other ways of getting a Casus Belli, which we are working on still, you could then choose to invade one of the neighboring areas. That wouldn't wholly allow you to conquer it. What we'll probably do is introduce some kind of point system where as you attack neighboring counties like that, it slowly allows you to accumulate more and more of their regions, moving the boundaries of their land inwards, to the point where if it's an NPC county, then you would actually be able to take over that county outright, or split it with another neighbor who's also attacking that county. So the borders and boundaries of the different domains will change throughout Kingdoms of Elyria. If you, however, end up in an area where everybody around you is player-owned, the mechanics are the same, except that now you'd be getting Casus Belli and invading neighboring players. Similarly, it wouldn't automatically allow you to conquer them and take over those. We're very strict about the idea that if you came into Kingdoms of Elyria with a domain like a county, that you exit with a county. It might be smaller in size because the surrounding counties have carved into it a little bit, but you'll always maintain at least the minimum size we set for a county, and you can't lose it. So
I feel like we need a diagram
right.
to explain this best. So yeah.
County in the middle, counties on the outside, they chomp on it, nom 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 nom. It gets smaller, they're all bigger.
Yeah.
It was the nom nom, I think.
Yeah. Be sure to include that.
Yeah, when you transcribe that, make sure you put nom nom inside. All right. Do we have what do you think? One more question?
One more?
Yeah, one more good
All
one.
right, let's get a good one more question, and
Good
then
one,
we're
not
gonna
about
cut it off.
tribes.
Okay, guys, come on. Question.
Let's get a live question. Let's get one off the Twitch channel.
All But Lemons says, I love the salt rock lamp.
That's a good question.
That was not a question. That was a
No,
statement.
I'm waiting for them.
We-
They're just like,
We have them all over the office, actually. There is, I think, 6 of them in the office now.
We're talking about land management. All I could think about was caravans.
Yeah.
I'm not going any more than that.
Nope.
tell us about tribes.
No. Nope.
The caravans one is the most interesting, though.
Yeah. Maybe someday.
Soon.
Let's see. Regarding, this is from Celeris. Regarding the coat of arms creator, will that fall under alpha experiences, as in during KOE or the MUD? And if it does, what can we expect from it?
Oh, great question.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
The
question is about the
yeah.
coat of arms generator. And when will it be available? Will it be for the alpha experiences or when?
That is a good question. We haven't set an exact date on it yet. We do want people to be able to select and provide a name for their noble houses, and they'll use those during the alpha experiences. So they'll have that available in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD. I'd like to have those coat of arms being available in Kingdoms of Elyria so that you can at least see them in your UI and stuff like that. But it doesn't have to be available right away, so we'll probably prioritize that against the work that we're trying to do.
Mhm.
But it doesn't take a huge amount of work. It's just identifying the ordinances and the different charges and kind of what shapes and things like that we want to provide, and then coming up with a list. The bigger problem is it takes time for our concept artists to create all that stuff. So I don't have a firm answer on it, but we'd like to get it out as soon as we can, and it's not blocking anything else, and nothing else is blocking it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be Eddie doing it. So the art. Do you want Eddie to do the concept art for the tribes first, or the coat of arms generator?
I feel like it's going to come after tribes. I feel like it's going to come after tribes.
He's not a high demand for tribes right now,
I-
though, so I think he has time.
I suspect that it's going to be after tribes, after we do domain and settlement selection, and sometime during early parts of Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria. Maybe even before, depending upon when those become available.
Yeah, mechanically speaking, it wouldn't be strictly necessary for those first alpha experiences.
Right.
No.
You'll have text that says the name of it. We could add all the features, but that's what the game launches for, is having all the features. So it'll get in there
Yeah.
before launch.
Quick question though, and this one I think is really important, but it came a little late. This is from XDRG11 on Twitch. What happens if a kingdom or king does not participate in Kingdoms of Elyria?
So
That's
the
a good
question is, what happens if a king does not participate in Kingdoms of Elyria or Elyria MUD?
Or really any of the title land
Yeah,
holders.
really anything. Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a king. It can be a count or a duke or anything like that. The answer is, then they don't participate. We had mentioned earlier that we want these to be optional experiences. They're opportunities for the individuals who want to play the game to participate in the history and the lore, to help build up their alliances, and to kind of become engrossed in the game, because really the game does start with settlement and domain selection. It doesn't begin with launch. The Dance of Dynasties, at the very least, begins as soon as settlement selection happens, and then definitely upon the start of Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD. But those who choose, for whatever reason, or perhaps they can't participate, the absolute worst thing that would happen is that though other surrounding domains, whether or not that be a county or a kingdom or a duchy, were to actively participate and to view you as a target, and then were to continue to proactively try and engage in your settlement, in which case the NPCs that we have in your stead would do the very best they could to defend and play the game kind of in your absence, but there is a potential that they could carve out smaller pieces of your domain or settlement. You wouldn't know the difference necessarily. Well, you're going to know the difference because you did the settlement selection. So at that point, you're going to know what your size of that domain or settlement originally was, and you're going to see what the size of it is after. But from our perspective, what that really means is that's what your domain size was at launch, which is kind of like if we had done a randomly generated one rather than just allowing people to kind of work proactively, then you potentially could have ended up with one that small randomly anyways.
I just had a great idea.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, really great idea.
Let's hear it.
So,
On
because-
camera. I've never heard of this before, so let's...
because the Dance of Dynasties
Oh no.
is
Somebody
intended
gif that. Gif it.
is intended to start officially at a certain point,
Mhm.
when settlement selection
I know where this is going, but go ahead.
occurs. So we should maybe come up with a different name for the unofficial dance that's going on right now, like the Prance of Dynasties. The Prance of Dynasties?
Jig of Dynasty.
The Jig of
The
Dynasty.
Jig.
Another Giphy. You did that specifically so you actually saw,
Oh
at
my
least you didn't
God.
do the like stare to the camera while you did it, because that would be worse. You're like trying to dance a jig
With
while
like a serious
staring.
face,
Yeah.
like staring at yourself.
I was pretty sure that you were gonna say we should commemorate the start of the Dance of Dynasties with like a formal dance or something like that.
Oh, could you do something for us?
Well, what do you mean me? Can
I'll
I
get the lipstick.
Oh, Caspian. They've already photoshopped lipstick on you.
Oh God.
That didn't take long.
No, it didn't.
No, it happened just like moments
Immediately after.
that, like the first thing.
That's awesome.
Well, there's
Good
The
times.
question is was it at least a good shade? Was it a red or
It
a
was
purple
a
or?
very pale pink that actually matched your complexion pretty well.
Oh,
I dig
that's
it.
good.
I
Yeah,
dig
Yeah,
it.
and then
that's
they
good.
went really, really
Yeah.
vivid red.
That's good. All right. Okay. I think we've answered all the questions we can answer for today. We definitely took a significant chunk of time. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you got your questions answered. If you did not,
Go read the design journal.
the
Go
chances
read
are
the
good the
design
answer was
journal.
there. And if that's still not there, then of course definitely hit the forums. Make sure you post your questions there. We'll come through after this. Many of us will hit Discord and IRC and the forums after we sign off from here to make sure that any additional questions you guys have are answering the best that we can. That's all from us here at Soulbound Studios. Stay tuned next month for our next design journal, and well, probably more recent than that, but our next Q&A. We don't have the topic yet, but as soon as we know what the topic of our next design journal is, we'll be sure and share that with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll share that in the next update.
Wait, before we do
Oh.
anything else,
Okay.
Huh.
Mark Zaku on Twitch said you dressed like a little schoolboy, and that you dancing that little dwarf jig made him very happy.
Wow.
Well, see, I dressed like Sozo today,
Yeah.
so accurate.
I dressed like me today.
Schoolboy.
Oh, final thing. The new tribe. Oh, sorry. I gotta.
Yeah.
message.
We'll see you guys.
Bye.